Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Hello, everybody. I would like to call to order the February 26th Budget Subcommittee meeting. This meeting is being recorded. Brian and I just wanted to touch base on, there was a technology issue with the last meeting and it was not recorded because of limits. Did you want to give an update?
Sure, yeah. So during that meeting, we hit our cloud storage capacity. So the meeting did not record. We apologize for that. But going forward, Kelly Powers is going to periodically just check to see what the cloud storage capacity is at. And then she will download to Google and back up to a flash drive the meetings. So we won't have that happen again.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
We will start with grants and gifts.
Continuing on.
Do you think so? How would they have?
Also under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53, when it comes to gifts from individuals, any officer or department of a city or town may accept gifts from an individual for educational purposes, may expend said funds for the purpose of educational purposes with the approval of the school committee. And then the final policy I want to touch on with KCD, and that specifically is related to the playground. We get to that is gifts that would involve changes in school plans or sites will be subject to school committee approval. So with that, I will turn it over to Betsy and I will bring up on the screen her gift report. Over to you, Betsy. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, everyone. I'm pleased to report. I do have a revised report from last year because I got locked out of one of the donors and it took me a long time to be able to get back in. I worked with them and we finally resolved it. So I want to update that report as well and then get that one accepted. And then I'll do this half year from July 1st till December 31st for this year. So do you want me to go through the whole thing or do you all have copies of it? And just
Yes.
go through it?
No, we
have copies. Yeah.
Speak to the bottom line numbers.
Yep, and if you have any questions, so the revision amount from the first submission to this one is an increase of $1,218.38.
Betsy, you're talking about fiscal 23, correct?
Yes, that's from July 1st, 23 through June 30th, 24. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, my bad. It is
22,
23. It's the 22, 23, because it went back quite a ways. And then I updated this one as well so there's 3 reports coming in tonight for approval. So the 22, 23 report, that's the one, the revision was updated, 1,218.38. For a total of monetary gifts of $114,124.15, in-kind donations of $99,494,000.99. That's the 22-23 full year.
And just so the committee, again, the reason why she's reporting out that year again is because Benevity was not included that $1,000, so she's updated the report from that year.
Yeah, you and a bunch of people.
Do Benevity too?
Yeah, it was hard to get back in, but we finally resolved it. And then the July 1st, 23 through June 30th, 24, another full year. I also had some new additions from that, but I'm not sure if I reported out the full year yet on that, but the monetary donations for that full fiscal year are $46,632.06 and in-kind donations of $71,475.05. And then also, I might just point out about the scholarships at the bottom. Even though we do not include them in the gift report, they're worthy of noting.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, so for the 22-23 school year, scholarships were at $199,800 to 106 recipients. The 23-24 school year, scholarships totaled $141,350 to 161 recipients. And then we're working on scholarships for this year. Students are now applying. The providers are kind of in the process now of choosing the recipients, and then they'll be awarded in May. And then so far this fiscal year, I have July 1st, 24 through December 31st of 24, monetary donations of a total of $169,747.93, and in-kind donations of $36,048.97. And the high school has a very large amount because we've got $100,000 for the cosmetology department. And Brian, what was the other one we discussed?
The Chestnut.
Oh, yes, the $20,000 for the Chestnut athletic donation.
Can you explain, just so everyone knows what the difference between the monetary and the in-kind?
Sure.
In-kind is?
So monetary is cash or check or an electronic deposit, and an in-kind is like an item, and what is that worth? So say someone gave a basket of school supplies, and how much, if we had to buy it, how much would that cost? That's how we assess the in-kind value.
For the monetary for the 22 to 23 for Adams, that's $806. Was that rolled into Chapman the following year, or where would that lie the following year?
No, the elementary schools stay with the elementaries.
No, Adams.
Oh, Adam, oh, yes, that went over to Chapman. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, so how it works, so it's like the elementaries, they keep those go into the principal's gift account. Adams rolled into Chapman, and then a lot of times, especially when they get to the high school, if it's for the class ofs, then it follows them all the way through so that they use it for activities.
For that specific grade.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Mhm. And then just, I also wanted to share, and I'm going to make a request, if you could please, at school committee, mention two other programs that are very important, and just another way to keep it in people's minds, that the textile recycling program, to date, the schools, well, the whole program itself has prevented 1,237.94 tons from entering landfills, with a DPW cost savings for disposal fees of $90,769.15, and total program earnings to date, $130,020.70. However, the DPW keeps their money, but we get all the rest. And we have started a program with them for corporate citizen textile bins. So they're around different places in town. There are some that are in stations 1 and 5 for the fire department. And there's some at, I should have written them all down. Union Point has a couple. Pond Plain has one. And Chapman ended up getting 3 one for each grade. And the high school has 5 now because CTE got 1. And then there's a few other around town, Stellatero Park and a few others around town. And then we get all those funds that are generated from that as well. And then I'm still working on trying to get more bins placed around town, which just more for us. So, textiles are part of the waste mandate. So you're not supposed to put them in.
Can't put them in.
Yeah.
If you add a bin, how do you decide who gets that bin?
So I work with Bay State Textiles, and they assess whether or not it's, if they think it will generate a good amount, and also access to the bin. It has to be safe for the driver to have enough space and traffic wise for them to be able to access the bins.
And who decides what's
Which
collected, which school? Thank you.
Oh, anything that's the town goes into the administrative gift account.
So anything not at a school would go into the district-wide?
Yes, and the ones at the fire station especially, we've been using those to help pay for the CPR cards for teachers and staff, students and staff and town employees. And then that brings me to the other one is the CPR courses. So can I give these to you, to someone to talk about at the meeting? That'd be great, thanks. Appreciate it. Does anyone have any other questions?
I don't. Does anybody else have any questions from the committee?
I just had one. For 2022-23, Hungry's monetary is exceptionally high. Is that because they were raising money for the playground or?
No, I think that was that grant for that woman.
Yeah, I can't think of the family's name, but they left
It was a trust.
about $52,000 gift for, it was left to the Pingree to use for,
Professional development, staffing,
Yep.
like for the staff.
Oh, awesome. Great, thank you.
and we're tracking that expenditure, spending that down.
So, so just, what can principals use this money towards?
Whatever the
They-
designation is of the gift.
So if they just want to donate $1,000 to Nash School,
Mhm.
they don't give any specifics, the
We
principal?
We prefer that they give some sort of designation for it. But it becomes whatever the designation is, that whoever is in charge of that budget, that cost center, will spend to that. So for example, we're tracking at Pingree the expenditures as it relates to professional development, any materials. And we'll actually touch on it in our next topic, which is a gift. When a donor gives a gift, they can impose certain restrictions on it that we do our best to expend within that. But we do tracking and reporting out upon request.
Great.
And we are going to
Cunningham.
be putting out shortly, excuse me, some sponsorship opportunities for Special Olympics and for, oh my gosh, Credit for Life Fair. So, and then a few other things are coming up too, but I'm not ready to share all that quite yet. But actively taking on new partners. I just got another one today that information will be going out shortly for fundraising opportunity and keep plugging away.
Love it.
Can I ask- So you mentioned Benevity. So there are a lot of companies that now use them to filter donations. When they come through, are they coming through showing where the money should go or like who it's from? So the schools.
generates-
So the
It
schools know.
generates a report for each electronic deposit.
Okay.
Go through and then I download it
And
and
then
then
you shoot it through
to
wherever the designation is. Okay.
And that's the great thing
Working on
about,
the transfer.
And Blackbaud is another one that does that as well.
that's what's great about Betsy's reports. It's it can be by school, by donor, by campaign as
Okay.
it's called, which is
Mhm.
basically how it's used.
School's easiest to follow.
Sure, it's easy.
It is.
It's a lot of work. Appreciate Betsy's work on it.
Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the public? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Bill.
My head's in the way.
Thanks. Just a curiosity question on the 24th, July to December 24 report. I'm curious if you know that's the proceeds, was it 21,000, almost 22,000 in kind donations?
Yes,
Is that
they-
one big thing or a bunch of different?
No, they had a very unique gift. 100 bikes were donated along with helmets and they had an assembly and talked about bike safety.
It's a cool program.
It was really neat. It was very cool.
First graders.
They did a lot of neat tricks in the assembly to show them what to do and what not to do on a bike. It was very cool. And there was 2 kids that had birthdays, so they got to cut the ribbon. Fun, yeah.
All right, thanks, Betsy. We appreciate your report.
Betsy.
Thanks, Betsy.
Moving on.
Chapman Band gift. We are very grateful and pleased to announce a sizable donation from the Murray family in honor of memory of Jack Murray. This gift will be used to provide access and opportunity for music to Weymouth students for many years to come. Obviously, want to much thanks and appreciation to the Murray family. I also want to thank Principal Dolan and Assistant Principal Dennis Jones. Spent time with the family, just to understand how they want to use the gift. So what we can do, looking at maybe the second March meeting, do more official, receiving of the gift. We'll have a letter associated with the intended use of the gift, but I wanted to share it here first at Budget Subcommittee. So the $106,000 that was raised through a GoFundMe will go to such things as equipment, instruments, repairs. There'll be high school scholarship fund created, any middle school camps related to band, field trips, and shirts for the band kids. I think what's great about this gift is it's over a number of years. So it'll be spent over an 11-year period, and it will be factored into the middle school spending each year. We will track it and be able to report out each year as the spending occurs. Alyssa and myself right now are working, so we're working with Paul, the dad, and town treasury to get the funds into a school account. And then we can begin to expend out of that account. So it'll take a little bit of time, but we have a call set up with the town treasurer, and we'll work with GoFundMe to make that happen. And the family would love to come to the March 27th meeting. And we can present the gift at that point. And hopefully the committee won't mind that and take action and go from there. So I just want to share that out. I think it's amazing what the community did. I think even as you see in the messaging, Paul and his wife Crystal thought it would just be, a couple $1,000s to support the building, but
Yeah.
it became a lot bigger. I think it was actually got some national recognition, if I'm not mistaken. So amazing thing, much appreciated.
As a parent of a band kid, I think this is an amazing thing, and just to show how well our community comes together when there's a tragedy. Any questions or comments from the committee?
No, it's just amazing.
So Matt will work with. And then the last is, for those following along at home, playgrounds. So during the pandemic and just after, I think we lost some of the process with this. We want to bring it back, and we apologize to the committee that I think the last couple didn't follow this exact process. But we want to bring to the committee, again, based on the policy KCD, gifts that would involve change to physical plant of the school be subject to school committee approval. So we'll bring to the committee a request from the parent council and the principal at the Murphy School. Pat sends his regrets. Pat has an event tonight. I think it's so Murphy School parent, is it brain games, very important at Murphy. Fun event for the family. So Pat couldn't be here tonight. But basically they're looking to get approval to begin fundraising campaign. And basically the financing would go towards design and construction of a new playground at the Murphy School. And they're seeking approval from the school committee to commence with these efforts. We have a great process in place, in my opinion, to work with the school, the parent council, and the town. Currently, we have, Seach is currently in the process. Other schools are wrapping up. So Murphy, I think Murphy's the last of the 8. Pre-K has one. So I think Murphy's at the last that's still looking to get a new playground. So they're hoping to start this process through school committee support.
I don't remember anyone coming to us before for approval.
So, yeah, Academy has, so Academy, I believe, Hamilton.
Hamilton, we talked about it, but I don't remember ever having them come to us for,
I think
Asking to do
anything
it.
during the pandemic, we kind of lost that
okay.
process. So
I think it's great,
Yeah.
but I just don't remember anyone ever.
Yeah.
I don't even remember.
the first couple
Johnson
did, Johnson was, but I think there was several during the pandemic and recent couple of years that we did.
No, this is great because we hear it on the Facebooks and the social media that they're raising money for it. And it's like, oh, right, I didn't have any idea. So this is great that they're coming back to what they should be doing. Thank you.
Well, and I think it was on us. I think it was the parent councils reached out to us, and superintendents approved. So we want to get back to making sure that the school committee has
Fabulous.
the policy. approved
Well,
this.
not only that, I think it's something that should be brought up, not in just in this forum, but in the school committee forum, because again, we just listened to Betsy, that there might be someone that would want to donate towards it
Right.
and not have a child in the
Yeah.
school system any longer.
Right.
So I think that's great. Does Nash Nash does not have a playground.
They do.
They do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was finished.
So Nash, Talbot, West.
That's it. Like
Yeah.
over this, yeah, for the ready for
Last
the
year,
media.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Great.
So
Awesome.
it's really since the pandemic, there was several, maybe 4 schools that did the process, got superintendent approval, but it just didn't make its way here.
So your idea is it for to come to budget and the full school committee for?
Again, I apologize, it didn't happen since the pandemic, so whatever, I think it's the committee,
I
it's
think it
it's
should
following
come here and
policy,
then
so I
just
don't know.
announce.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll put it on announcements.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to audits and reports.
Okay, audits and reports. We're going through a couple audits right now with the town. We actually have our internal audit conducted by our town auditor, Ryan Conley. So each year, he does an internal audit of certain areas of the school department. He's working with Alyssa now. They wrapped that up. A report will be forthcoming next meeting to the committee. But preliminary review of it is, it's all positive and good news from that internal audit. So but we'll give you the full report next meeting. We'll have that, right, Alyssa?
Correct.
Was there specifics reviewed or was it just kind of in general?
Payroll, everything, contracts.
okay.
yeah.
Payroll, yeah. So they do sample testing of payroll. They do sample testing of contracts. They looked at actually ESSER funding, but that was
Activities.
student activities. So they just say, they basically
Preschool.
sample test a lot of our transactions throughout the year.
Any questions? for anybody? Chapter 70 update.
Chapter 70.
Athletics budget.
We haven't done the chapter 70 yet.
Oh, sorry, I skipped, sorry.
All right, I have a bunch of presentations. Bear with me. I think it's here. Oh, that, yeah. Okay. All right, chapter 78, we did talk last meeting, actually. Gus did a little bit of a report out on some of chapter 70. I really wanted to focus on just what our allocation is for next year. This is in our presentation we'll do at the full budget hearing, and we also have it in our presentation to town council. I won't spend too much time on it, but basically it just goes over what the calculation is. So a foundation for each district is determined by the state. And then there is a calculated expected contribution locally, and then the difference is funded by state aid.
Bless you.
And as we've talked about in the past, years ago, Weymouth was below that minimum net school spending. They rate it like in percentages. So you want to be at 100% or greater. Weymouth 10, 15 years ago was under that level of net school spending so much that I think Desi came at the time and said, listen, you're getting dangerously low, and anything below 90% is like unacceptable. And you have to then, that number carries each year. So the town and school administration has worked over the last 10 years to not only consistently each year have the net school spending, above 100% as it should be, but they've been trying to make up for years past. So, but I did want to point out that I think a lot of the detail of, I think people think that it's just our operating budget that factors in net school spending. It's also what the town expends for schools, because you can look at a report on DESI and say, oh, 7-8 million, that makes sense. That's like our operating budget. But then there's this additional amount that gets us to what the net school spending number is. And so, for example, for FY23, so we're in FY25 right now. FY24, you still have end of year reports, audits going on. So it's a 2-year look back really to that net school spending number. So in FY23, we were at 78 million or 79 million almost operating. And then in addition to that, and this is what I wanted to share out, is some of the town costs. And people might wonder, where do these come from? So each town with the school department has an agreed upon letter defining expenditures that the town spends that are allocated to the school department. So what do I mean by that? So our operating budget, which we talk about every year, that's our budget directly for schools. there are also costs that the town incurs that they can allocate to schools. So for example, this $1 million, there's certain salaries in there that might be a portion of the CFO or a portion of the treasurer. This is standard amongst all cities and towns. So there is an agreed upon letter that, that the auditors look at each year. 93,000, it's another example, under student activities, security, and athletics. This is the allocation of our SROs to the school department. So we have police officers in the town that also are SROs. So they and allocate a portion of their salaries to that. That falls under the net school spending. Obviously, maintenance. But the big areas that you see here, and again, this gets into when you hear about the funding formula needing to be fixed. There's two big components with that, the state. It's inflation. Inflation's growing much greater than what the formula accounts for. And it's insurances and benefit costs that we incur as a town that is being factored into our net school spending number. So retirements, insurance for retired employees, and then you get into the tuitions. You know, it's the out-of-district tuitions, the charter school tuitions. And so all those funnel down to a number here. So when you look at reports, you see over 100 million. Wait, that doesn't make sense. You know, our operating budget is this, but in addition to our operating budget, it's all the town costs that are allocated to schools. So I think for this year, and guys, I think you reported to the last meeting, for 23, we're at like 111 or 112% net school spending. We always look at what the actual is. There is a budgeted number, so for 24, but I don't look at that because it doesn't include true costs. But for FY 23, we're at 111%, which is, when you look at the state, it's the bottom third. I think there's like 70 below us and 250 above us. So that's just some of the, just piggybacking on what we talked about last time. Again, key factors in Chapter 70, the foundation budget, it's enrollments, wage adjustment factors, inflation, and then just the local wealth, the income, the property values. But for us specifically for next year, we know now that in the governor's proposed budget is looking at $30 million, Chapter 70, $1 million in charter tuition reimbursement, 5.5 million in sending tuition assessments. And what does that all mean? Basically, what that means for Weymouth Public Schools is our Chapter 70 increase from last year, but from this year to what we're projecting next year through the governor's budget. And it's early on in the state process. We're looking at $437,000 increase in Chapter 70. So that's $70 per pupil. Our charter tuition reimbursement has gone up $550,000. So actually it's doubled since FY 25, which to me seems like an outlier. I don't know that we can rely on that much of an increase each year, but it is what it is. And then our charter sending tuition has increased. So it means it's a negative for us because it's an increase of the assessment. So the bottom line number of the Chapter 70 funds that we expect to get next year as an increase is just under 400,000. So we'll be getting, in addition to what we already get in Chapter 70 for next year, what equivalent is of, about 0.5% of our current FY 25 budget, $68 per student. So it really shows that the increase in our budget each year is, the burden is on the local, because we were only getting, if we're asking for, $4.5 million next year in our proposal, we're getting just under 10% of it from the state.
The reimbursements for charter too, that doesn't include transportation either, right? Is that separate?
Transportation, I believe, is part of,
It is part of the reimbursement.
we don't pay it separate.
Okay.
And the enrollment's about the same. I think we talked about that last meeting. It's roughly, I think it's just under 300 is the enrollment right now. Yeah, I think recent, and I think today there was a vote to increase South Shore at 225, I think. I think there's proposals across the state, but
It was approved today.
Yeah,
It was approved today.
there's like 4 charters that went out here.
So that's my chapter 70 update.
Any
Take any questions?
questions from the committee?
I just have a charter school question. Does charter schools have the same tuition rate across the state? So,
No,
No, that,
they're all different.
so when ours, yeah, it's a good, so when Brian's showing the increase, that's at social or charter for the most part, really.
Oh, yeah, I wonder how do they
Yeah.
figure that formula out?
Probably depending on the area, the location. That's all.
so even within social or charter, they accept Weymouth kids,
Social, yeah,
Anyway, so
anyone's.
any in the
yeah,
South Shore? And so do they all have the same tuition
that we would have.
that we would have?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So it's probably charter school specific.
Gotcha. The area that the
Right.
charter school is in.
Yeah, like that rate. for
Yeah,
the
that rate
areas,
for that-
The sending
that group,
schools,
yeah.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay,
Similar to a collaborative too. When you
Yeah,
increase
yeah,
the fees, it's the
The
school
entire
Right.
sending.
gotcha. Thanks.
Any other questions from the committee? Do you want me to open it up to the public now, or you wanna-
for that?
Yeah.
Whatever you.
We'll take questions from the public now for that
Chapter
piece,
70.
for the chapter 70 piece. Yeah? Go ahead, Ken.
Brian, did you, normally every year the town sends a memo to all the departments that says, here's your restrictions, here's the percentage target. Have you gotten that already from the town?
For overall budget, I'm
The
sorry.
overall budget for fiscal year 26, they issue a memo saying you should plan your budget around this number target.
So we have met, nothing specific in a memo to us, but we've met with the mayor's office. And when we present our level service, we'll talk about that. Right now, they're honing in on roughly 3% revenue,
3%.
3%.
I jumped the gun.
It's all right. You couldn't thinking ahead, Gus. You saved me a lot of the chapter 70 presentation from last week, so I appreciate that.
How many attractions? How many attractions?
Anybody else from the public? Okay. Moving on to athletics budget update.
Okay, so the, all right, let me just go back to stop sharing for a minute. Okay. So the athletic director, so Rob will be here next week to follow up with more detail on his, not only his operating, his ask for next year for his budget, but also actuals for this year. So I apologize. We still on the agenda, but we did want to touch base on the fact that he will be here next meeting to present. We'll have a spreadsheet that we can share out before next week that will break out by sport, by season, by functional expense, what the athletics budget is year to date this year and what the proposed budget is for next year. If you remember from our athletics subcommittee meeting, the first one we had, we left that meeting agreeing that our budgetary request to the town will include an operating expense increase of roughly $56,000. And that also does not include an increase in fees per the athletic director, his recommendation. Superintendent and I will talk about fees in a moment, but as it relates specific to athletic director and his request, he felt that an operating expense increase of $56,000 plus the increase in the operating budget to account for staff increases, COLAs, would be sufficient to fund his budget for next year. But he will come back next week with more details on that and also talk about some potential ways to generate revenue, ancillary revenue for us, for the school department.
And it is good that he's not here because that means our boys hockey team is in the state tournament right now at Natick. So that's where he is.
And that proposal it includes the removal of some competitive
Some
sports.
competitive, yeah, that kind of integrated kind of intramural and
Intramural.
competitive, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So Brian, that, through you, Chair. So Brian, that the next presentation that we get from athletics will have a level of detail that will justify the increase of 56 K roughly.
Correct.
And that will include middle and high school level of detail? So when I look at the original ask, when the athletic director came before us, the original ask was 115 for FY '26. And then in the draft budget book, it's 171. Is that reflective of the 56
Yes.
increase? And so I know we're going to talk about this in detail at the next meeting, but so it looks like the line item where the increase is embedded is contracted services for high school athletics. What is that? I guess, what does that mean?
That line is transportation costs. What else is in that line, Alyssa?
All the memberships, yeah.
It's
the dues.
non-personnel.
Yeah.
Um,
Non-personnel
But the biggest
expenses.
driver of that increase is transportation costs for high school athletics.
And then one more question, Chair.
Time.
With the, so next page, the staff, the
Yes.
staffing part of the budget. So, and the reason I'm asking these questions now is just in case there's something else to ask the athletic director directly at the next meeting. I'm looking at the staff page, page 40. So the top person, the one FTE, making 133, is, I assume that's our athletic director position.
Correct.
We're going to talk about the position at the person. The line after it for 78, that's currently the administrative assistant?
No.
No, that's the athletic trainer, which is an open position right now.
Oh, that's good for an athletic, that's a full-time athletic trainer
Correct.
who we're currently looking for,
Correct.
but we want to fund it.
Yes.
Then the next line is the 41, and so that is an administrative assistant?
Separate, yes.
Admin assistant.
Correct.
Yep.
And then, so I'm just wondering, so then after that, there's a 20,000?
2335. It's middle
Yeah.
school for 20,000, yeah.
Listen, those all-
I'm-
yeah, I know she does.
And then the next one is high school
So those are,
coaches,
that's one line
Coaches
for middle
per
school
the
coaches.
a unit A
one line-
contract,
Got it.
One line for high school coaches.
correct.
And so we don't have those as FTEs because they're stipends?
Correct.
Got it. I appreciate the clarification. I just really want to underscore my enthusiastic hope that the next meeting will have the information that we've been asking for a long time. I want to be able to vote on an athletics budget. Currently with what we have, just speaking for myself, I would not be able to vote on an athletics budget because I feel like we haven't been given one to vote on. And I really do want to vote on one.
I would second that. I feel like we still have more questions than answers.
Ditto. A lot of holes.
And we will, whatever that document is, will be available the day before. Make sure it's sent to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
I will open it, and any more questions from anybody? Any questions from the? No? You good?
We'll wait for the presentation.
Yeah. On to contracts and procurement?
I got nothing on that. Alyssa, do you have anything on that?
No.
Like-
Not currently.
We're-
Press break is coming in. I mean, that's exciting Friday,
Yeah.
just as far as some procurement, yes. The
Yeah.
rigging company's coming on that,
We're looking at,
ELA,
yeah,
Town council.
so superintendent, myself, Alyssa, we're looking at the potential and we'll have to go through, we'll have more information at next meeting. But we may look to get approval for potential of a 5-year contract for ELA curriculum. Could save us 6 figures potentially. And
The continuation of wit and wisdom.
yeah, nothing new.
Yeah.
Debate again.
Not a new one.
Not a new one.
Yeah, good thing you said that.
Yes.
Good clarification. But anything more than a 3-year needs council approval and also school committee support. So we're exploring the idea of doing a 5-year instead of a 1 or a 3.
Great. Any questions from the committee?
But we'll share that next time.
What was the other thing you said? You said, yeah, what was the other one?
the press break?
The press break. How are they getting it in
So
there?
exciting. A rigging company.
A rigging company with
Yeah.
about a quarter of an inch clearance.
Yes,
I might-
I mean.
That's Friday.
I might hang out
It's gonna be a
there.
big,
Hang out
it's
there.
gonna be cool.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
On to fiscal year 26 budget planning.
Thank you. Share screen. And if I could, I think I'll take capital out of order. I think that'll probably have less questions. I imagine. There's really nothing. So let me just get to that page.
Yep.
Okay, so here we go through the exercise of reviewing our capital needs. And we put a priority on certain items for this year. So we've got, Adams is complete. And the modulars are coming, contracts are in place for that. Johnson is still on our list, but it's not a priority right now because priority means we'd be doing something this year with it. So
Because we have no money.
because we have no money and we still have to have conversations on Johnson. So it's still on, if you have the backup of the full capital list, it still exists on there. We have other building items on there, rooftop units at the high school. But for us and when we meet, we'll be meeting with the mayor's office and the capital committee next month sometime. Our two high priorities, shouldn't be surprised. We just talked about curriculum is one, and then Chromebooks is the other. So those are two what we deem high priority. We still have on there our vehicles. We still have on there certain building things. Nothing building wise is at a critical point where we need to move it forward in capital. So if we're going to get any funding, we really want to prioritize it with curriculum and Chromebooks. We just received two. Did we get the vehicles? Are they in yet? No, did I? Okay. We have vehicles
Sad
rolling in
face.
any day now. We have vehicles rolling in any day. But we're keeping an eye on our fleet. And so next year, I imagine that back on capital, we'll probably prioritize a vehicle or two. But Superintendent, I feel very comfortable with this being our priority and hope that we can get funding for these items.
For the ones on your capital request that say study,
Yep.
can you just explain?
So study is there may need to be a feasibility study or some sort of study to further explore
Gotcha.
doing it. So it's the three categories are high, 1, 2, medium, 3, low, and then I think 4 is the study classification. One on there is, I think, a academy.
Yeah, the
Parking lot.
gymnasium
You have to study that a little more and before we move anything forward.
and the Pingree interior space.
Yes, so thank you for, so that Pingree, so we've talked a lot about, I know, Ellen and I talked about putting modules on buildings. The other alternative to putting modules on was doing interior building build-outs, we have a wonderful maintenance crew, but this would be a more robust, it involves systems, mechanicals. So we did put Pingree on there because there's really no space to put a modular, and there is a space need potential. I think Principal Rowan's done a great job on scheduling to address any building space needs right now. But in the future, we'd like to consider a build out of maybe the library space. So it's on the list.
Thank you. Question?
When you talked about that school spending and what our operating budget
Yep.
the town gives us, when we get capital money to pay for some of the things, does that go into our line item from the town?
No.
So no, there is
That
maintenance in
wouldn't-
there. So if we do certain maintenance costs that might be included, but something like that. So Chapman, for example, not part of the net school spending number.
Modulars.
The modulars.
Modulars,
Would
no.
not be, right?
That's a good question, yeah.
Thanks.
Any questions from the committee? Do you want to move on to the level service
Yes.
budget or the needs?
Level service budget. So the committee will see this again tomorrow night. Because we filed a superintendent's update. So I figured tonight here, share it out and be able to answer some more questions in detail.
Oh.
Um,
I think he gave it.
And so as we look to, so we talk about the budgetary factors, both last year and this year. And just to summarize, we've been talking about it for several years now. The end of ESSER, one-time money, also ARPA falls in that category too. Any pandemic-related funds that districts and towns receive one time. Growing needs of our students, inflation, and then declining revenues, which is really a big part of the story this year. So those are the big factors we've had the last 2 years. And so in our budget book, you'll see our summary request. So this 5.27% number, 92 million, that is our operating budget request for next year. And what it factors in our level service number. It factors in some district cuts we've already seen. We're not filling a couple of administrative positions, central office. It factors in compliance for this year and then compliance needs we see for next year. And it also factors in this 124,000, which I'll talk a minute about the cuts, but that is, we essentially used one-time money to solve a huge transportation increase problem that now has come back in this year's budget for next year. So basically, what we have is a budgeted request of 92 million. And what we think and what we're hearing in the conversations with the town is that revenues to support will probably fall somewhere around 3%. So if your costs are going up 5.27% and your revenues to support are approaching 3%, there's a shortfall. So for us, unfortunately, that's a $1.9 million shortfall. So let's talk about the shortfall. What is it? Well, the projected shortfall for next year, 1.9 million, is 2.25%. And as we've talked for years about the fiscal cliff, our goal has always been to soft land it. And last year we had a $5.3 million shortfall. Now, I think people are on the assumption we cut 5.3. We did not cut $5.3 million last year. We would have felt that really a lot. So what we did is the $5.3 million shortfall from the factors of ESSER money going away, needs of our students, inflation, decreasing revenues, that 5.3 million through the combination of cuts, increased revenue support, and using one-time money to soft land that fiscal cliff, we now have a $1.9 million shortfall. And so the exercise for this year in addressing the $1.9 million shortfall is to go through the same, to make cuts. We're going to potentially see some increased revenue through fees. We're going to propose when we start to talk about fees, a blanket 5% fee across the district for everything to account for inflation. And then the responsible use of one-time funds, because you can kick the can down the road so many times. So what we have the opportunity is to use some our remaining allocation of pandemic funds around, I think, 300,000 we could use to push the problem out one more year. But the lion's share of what we need to do, and that what superintendent and administration have gone through to start to look at, and we want to talk about a little tonight, is how do we address that $1.9 million shortfall through budgetary cuts? So that's where we were, where we are, what the shortfall is. And I'll turn it over to the superintendent to talk a little bit about the plan.
Thanks, Brian. I think a little bit different than last year. So Brian gave us a little bit of a look at the past and how we're trying to go about things this year is, we've started really early. We've tried to be super transparent in the whole process. And I think part of that process starts with knowing that we are up against a $1.9 million cut again, is the, first of all, the thought process of, you don't just start cutting, right? You have to have a thought process. And I think being in the district for over 20 years and working with a team that's been in the district for a very long time, I feel like we know our district pretty well. So kind of like, this isn't a vision or anything like that, but this is kind of our guiding work that we're doing, is like when we think about our sustainability plan as we move forward, like Brian's saying, is that we're trying to start to live within our means, like we say at our houses, right? Inflation has gone up, the revenues are creeping down, and there is no more, COVID money. So we're now charged with living within our means, and how do we get there? So when I look at the sustainability plan, I really look at it as like our long-term plan, what's good for us, for all of our students. And I kind of try to come up with the things that mean a lot to me is, we focus a lot on an inclusive whole child experience, right? That's an important thing for us in Weymouth, that we ensure our students receive a well-rounded education. And that the importance of the well-rounded when you're doing cuts is that you don't cut programs. You watch some of the towns and districts near us, they're just cutting certain programs. So it's important to focus on the well-rounded whole child, where you're talking about a strong core curriculum, but also the enrichment piece, the arts, the wellness, and the enrichment opportunities that are so important to our kids during school and after school. So the plan is that we've been charged with trying to make the most thoughtful adjustments that align with these priorities that are going to give us longer term sustainability. We don't see this as a 1-year problem, well, 2 years absolutely at this point, but we don't see this as going away for next year either, right? So we're trying to prepare ourselves for the future and the challenges that we're facing. Brian had mentioned some of the increased costs. We have to assume those costs are going to continue to increase each year. So that's kind of giving you a little bit of a thought process into how we're thinking and how we're moving through this process. So when we look at our sustainability plan, first and foremost, one of the hardest things for us is the fact that we know we are going to affect people's careers and their livelihoods. I think that's what hits me hardest. I've been here a long time. I was the assistant superintendent. I mentored a lot of these people coming in, so it's a very hard thing for us to talk about, and we do not take that lightly. And that's part of our thoughtfulness in the planning of moving forward, because it does affect people's careers and livelihoods. Some of these people just starting in their careers. So when we look at our reductions in staffing, Brad had mentioned when Mr. Ransfield retires at the end of June, the Executive Director of Elementary Education position will go away. That it will just kind of be picked up by the administrative team. The Director of Fine and Performing Arts, again, that's things that we will kind of take over. We're not going to replace that. That person moved on to a different district. So we'll kind of take on some of that weight. We met with the elementary instructional coaches yesterday. That was yesterday, right? We met with them yesterday to kind of talk through this process with them, because like I said, this is a very difficult thing. All of our instructional coaches will have jobs. A lot of them are very tenured in our district, so they will be returning to the classroom, many of them, right? So again, they're in a position where they still have a salary, but we know that we've completely changed the trajectory of, their career, which is an important thing, and not to mention the work that they've done for our district. We implemented a very heavy lift of a literacy curriculum over 3 years. We never could have done that without them. And we know with them returning to the classroom, again, that's a lift for other people, right? Because that work still has to be done. And that's a loss. That's a huge loss to us kind of moving forward. And, when we talk about needs, like those are the things that, as we start to have better times, we'll look for those positions as well to come back and support us. The other piece is approximately 20 full-time employees at the secondary level. So that's Chapman in the high school. That is 7 grades, so grades 6 through 12, or even post-grad, so, all the way up to age 22. Our goal is to try to do those cuts across all content areas, all grade levels. So what we're hoping the impact is really going to look like is class sizes are going to slightly increase. We've found some areas where some class sizes are a little bit smaller. So we are going to do our due diligence to make those cuts so that we're not eliminating any programs. We're not really eliminating opportunities. You're just going to see class sizes increase slightly to 24, 25, 26 students in classes. The other pieces Brian had mentioned is increasing all fees to account for a lot of the inflation that we're seeing, and then utilizing ARPA one-time funding. And like I said, I can't I can't say enough how difficult this is for our whole team to begin to talk about these things, because like I said, it is people's livelihoods that we are talking about at this point.
The last thing, before questions, we just want to remind folks of the timeline. So we're here tonight in front of Budget Sub. We're here next week again for Budget Sub. And then we get into the public hearing and the school committee vote in March. So March 13th is the public hearing at the Humanities Center. March 27th, hopefully with a final approval and vote of the committee. It will go through the process of the town, and then Mel and I will be back in front of the town on May 13th to present to budget management. And as Mel mentioned, we're having lots of conversations with the folks. She mentioned the coaches yesterday. We'll have more conversations with staff. We've talked with the union about this. We'll continue to talk to the union. We've talked with the mayor's office. We're talking with you folks, and we're having conversations, with counselors if they have questions too. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
The May 13th date, is that set or is that tentative?
It's
The one that you guys present?
pretty
think it's-
firm. Yeah, that's from the town auditor.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions from the committee?
So when you, as much as I hate saying all fees are going to be increased, does that mean that some of the activities that don't have fees will now have fees? Like,
We're not implementing new fees.
so it's not going to be implement, so, okay.
When we say fees, high school athletic fees, transportation fee, tuitions, what's that?
Technology standards.
Technology fees. We'll be proposing a new tech fee separately as part of our fee process. But to answer your question, this blanket increases is just on existing fees.
I also am, yeah. I also have an issue with the fee thing, but we've talked about it. I think because we're in the situation we're in, I feel like we all have to meet as a collaborative effort. This includes you, Betsy, and really push out those programs that can assist families so people know about them. And so we have data to support the families that need to be supported.
And if it's helpful to clarify, so when we talk about the fee increases to account for inflation and increased costs, we've always had the luxury of supplementing with
Right.
the operating budget. We don't have that luxury. If we're cutting 1.9, it's hard to justify to continue to supplement more. So we're really increasing to offset the increased costs of things that are funded by fees.
And I think we have to really think outside the box. That's what I was thinking about with you, Betsy, is looking into sponsorships, looking into people that really, the community wants to help.
So
I think now is the time to.
we actually had a quick conversation earlier that I think part of what the athletic director might be bringing next week is ways to look at community partnerships, and Betsy's always willing, ready, and able to support us in whatever we need with that.
And I think that rely on us too, we all have contacts within the district too that can kind of help support that as well.
Can I just say one thing? I don't know if a lot of people are really aware, but I've been sending out the community spotlight. And that's where I put, it's overwhelming, the amount of information, but there's so much good information in there, a lot of resources, a lot of fundraising, things that are happening. So if people want to support a particular group, here's all the dates that they're happening. And it's all kind of automated now so that we have a way to track all the requests, and then that way we can share them out. So maybe we can mention that at the meeting as well tomorrow about the community spotlight, that they can have
It's not
access.
you'll see it's the equivalent when you account for like the costs that already happened with like contractual obligations with the increases. The savings is going to be the equivalent of roughly 2 positions when you factor in a 5% increase in all the fees. It's like $120,000. So I think it was just for us, we're like, how can we, as Mel said, how can we spread this out? So we raise all the fees 5%, or we're cutting 2 more staff.
Any other questions from the committee? Yes.
Through you, Chair, it's just more of a comment, and this is a very difficult conversation, and I know that it's going to continue to get harder. And so while we're at the beginning of it right now, I just want to say it's already way different from last year. And I know that this is hard information to share publicly and to put on the screen, but I do think it's definitely what the school committee wishes we had last year. And I think I know it's what the public appreciates more. So I really do know that this is very, very hard, but thank you very much for opening this conversation up the way that you did.
I agree with that. Anybody else? Do you want to go over the needs list or do you want to open?
Yeah, either. I mean, it might help if I bring up the needs list.
Yeah, yep.
So let me bring that up. So back to this one.
It's so little.
Let's see if we can get a better. Where is it? Rotate. Okay. So we're going to toggle between two. So when we talked about this number. So we've had, since the budget got approved last year, we've had to add a number of positions just based on compliance. It's part of the ask. And we're projecting some positions for next year. So this 399,000 number is the needs list essentially. So this bottom line number. So it is these positions. We are looking closely at this list too. We anticipate that we can further reduce this list. But we have these positions here. And then if you remember, we have the future planning. So we have the positions here that add up to the 399,000. And then over here, we have the future planning considerations positions that are all listed. So that needs list hasn't changed since last time we presented. If anything, it may further go down as we're doing cuts. But just wanted to share that before we open it up to questions.
So the column on proposed assignment,
Hold on, I don't think I'm sharing anymore.
sorry.
I apologize if anyone missed that. It's up on the screen now, Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay, so let me do that again. I apologize. So our compliance for next year number.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at this one.
Yep, I'm reviewing again because I think the public missed, anyone watching missed it. So the 399,000 number here on our proposed budget is the total of these positions here, which we might further look at. But in addition to those positions, we also have the future planning considerations, and all of those positions are listed here. So with that, I'll take a
So
question.
really, it's, the proposed is for next year. So really, it's like two sets of lists of staff.
For the needs list.
Yes. okay.
Yes, there's the prioritize that we think could create either or could potentially create compliance issues.
Mhm. And
On
then.
the left, and then the right with a total, and the right is positions that don't yet have dollars associated with, but because it's not part of that. It's basically all of administration, principals, everyone, we've looked very closely at all these lists, and that's how we divided up the needs list.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Can Danielle, if I can just add, just again, for the transparency, when we were doing the needs list, we kind of didn't know where we were cutting necessarily.
Right.
So one of the things is in needing to eliminate all of our elementary instructional coaches, one of the needs that we're talking about is oversight of our elementary schools. So we're considering having 2 coordinator positions. So when you lose instructional coaches at all of the elementary buildings, one of our biggest concern is that, we want our elementary buildings to have their own unique identity, but we also want them moving in the same direction together. So part of losing all of our coaches is kind of losing that togetherness and the moving in the same direction. So I don't know if we go back or but just so everybody understands, and part of our budget planning is we're hoping that we might be able to turn at least 2 coordinator positions that would work under the new assistant superintendent to do a lot of the work that the elementary
7
instructional
people were doing.
coaches did, 7 people did. So it's basically taking the work of 7 people and having 2 people do it.
You could actually add, we had an assistant superintendent of teaching and learning and the executive director
Mhm.
of elementary education. So we're only going to have one of those positions as well. So that's another
Yeah.
area that,
And I think being here for so long that we've recognized over time, when we've had cuts like this, we've made cuts that have made the recovery very, very difficult. And I think it was 2008, we lost almost all curriculum oversight. And then, 5, 6 years later, the Department of Ed is coming in saying, do you have written curriculum? We're like, yeah, not kind of. And do you have written curriculum that your teachers follow that written curriculum? And we just had lost oversight and training and professional development. So we don't want to dig ourselves that hole again. So that's kind of also part of our thinking as well. We don't want to lose the gain that we've had.
Any other questions from, go ahead.
For Seach, the full-time BCBA, so they're increasing to a full-time, but there's no salary increase, it's $0.
The schedule change.
They're split.
They're split right now.
So one would go
So they're going to be full-time at Siege.
full-time at one school.
Okay,
So is that budget item split between 2 schools right now?
Right now, the person goes between 2 buildings. They're just-
so it's going to shift to one
Just
school?
shift one.
we'll bring that 0.4 over. So there wouldn't
So-
be any cost with that because it's already budgeted elsewhere.
So they're coming out of, I don't know, whatever other
They're
school,
coming from, going to Siege.
and just going to Seach. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
The
it's still
assignment,
funded,
it's
yeah.
still the same budget.
It's not an additional ask because there's no, yeah.
Just scheduling.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, I will open it up to the public here for any questions, comments, or concerns.
What's the town revenue decreasing?
Just, walk up to the
Yeah,
table.
just come to the table, sir. Just come up to the table, sir. So the microphone picks you up. It's just so the microphone can pick you up. So if you can-
What's the reason for the budget shortfall, or rather the revenue?
The revenue
The
decrease?
drop in revenue, yeah.
So we've been receiving from the town, last 9 years, we've received 3.8% a year, roughly. And that's driven by the tax levy, local receipts, and new growth. So they've been able to invest the equivalent of 3.8 a year for the last 9 years. So when we get revenue projections, and you saw the Chapter 70 piece, minuscule in what Weymouth gets for schools from the state as an increase. As we're having conversation with the mayor's office and they're looking at what the town's revenue is to support the budgets, we're hearing and having discussions around 3%. So we're using a 3% number where historically, the last 9 years, we've been able to use a 3.8%. So that in effect automatically creates a deficit to cut. But good question.
The town's saying that they're not getting the revenue.
The revenue, yeah.
Who's next?
Feel a little inappropriate because I wasn't sure. I didn't know that was going to come up about the staffing. Because I know we were trying to get people out again we've been coming out here for STEAM. But it kind of goes in line with what you presented right before, your priorities and your plans. And you really emphasize enrichment and well-rounded opportunities for kids. So you're going to have to cut all these teachers in Chapman in the high school, which stinks. And it seems like we're not getting the same eyes on us statewide because we're losing enrollment going into the higher grades. That's what I feel like I've learned. coming to these meetings. We're losing students as they get older. So coming up to these meetings and trying to get creative with you guys to like figure out how we can make our elementary awesome again. You know, losing STEAM stinks. I feel like there's people that tell me that they lost when their kids were here 10 years ago. I have a kid that's gonna be, you know, I'm gonna still be coming up here in 7 years and he's gonna be in 4th grade then. And I don't wanna be coming up again, be like, oh, now we lost music. So, I know I'm focusing on elementary. I know that there's a million other needs in the city, but I came up here with some ideas just to be creative on the STEAM need, on the everything else needs for the elementary. But one thing was on the needs list, is there a way for us to know how much the STEAM program actually cost you guys that then it now is gone? So we know what we saved last year, sorry.
Absolutely. Great question. I think there's two pieces that we should talk about here. One is so it was 4 positions because it was 4
Yeah.
people shared between 8 buildings. So call it $360,000 to $400,000, probably $400,000 given what the staff were. So the idea of taking a $1.9 million deficit, adding 400, making it 2.3, and then go through the exercise of prioritizing. I think the other piece of your question is more important and crucial. And so if we're not gonna have the 4 people to do that, what can we do in our buildings to, how do we define STEAM and understand what it is and embed it? And superintendent and our HR director have talked a lot about this. So I think it's a great area to talk about and get some ideas and continue to talk about it. So.
Well, I mean, I know that this is right now when you guys put things in and out of the budget. So again, feeling extremely selfish knowing that what you guys just had to present. But again, I don't know that it's gonna be an easier in the next meeting when I'm sure this will be out there again. But with that said, so knowing that, and also knowing that all the STEAM teachers were then kind of moved into other positions at the are they all at elementary? Because I know we have Mrs. Keith.
So the 4, I think 1 left the district.
Okay,
And then 3 are back in the
3, okay.
other classroom roles.
My thing was just trying to, again, be creative because again, the 5th specialist block is what really people are mad about. People are mad about this. So if there's a way to be creative with maybe, I don't know, line items that aren't gonna cost years and years and years of money to maybe beef up the curriculum this year. And if that can be in the budget to suffice, you know, us parents coming up here. I know I talked to some teachers saying, oh, when I've had to work on curriculum, I got hired for like 10 hours in the summertime. And I was that curriculum person for West or for that building or for whatever it was. So if we can see maybe that and know that and let the parents know that, maybe it's not tech next year, maybe it's a whole other curriculum because what Ms. Fratt did is amazing and it's like needed though, but it's needed for like a different thing. Like the 5th graders probably shouldn't be doing what the kindergartners are doing.
We actually just talked about before the meeting, the HR director, Jeremy and I were talking, he's way more expert.
I just happen to work at the elementary.
Please
Yeah, I know.
jump in, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sit here and say anything definitive because but we're definitely, it's a high priority for us.
Yeah. And
We know, like sitting here looking at what's going on, we know the reality of bringing back those positions is just not realistic right now. But that doesn't mean that we can't do a better job from where we were sitting here last year, eliminating those positions to where we're going to go in this coming September. So we're bringing in a new assistant superintendent of teaching and learning. That individual will be a big part of that process in terms of making sure that we have something good in place. And I will work alongside with her, but also there's some other variables that we just have that have made it difficult to kind of put what we want to put in place.
Yeah.
And we hear you for sure, and we agree in terms of those STEAM experiences and just making sure that kids have something more than maybe what they have. And I think we've made some progress. I'm not going to say it's where we want to be. And I think, so that's going to be a big priority. We also are going to look at, science is one component of STEAM. We know that, but that's a big part of it, I think, when you kind of think about STEAM and think about what the components of that are. So we can expand on that science, but we want to look at our We talked about consistency a little bit across the building, a big part of that, making sure that we are doing a good job, whether it's from kindergarten, what does science look like to fifth grade? You know, what does that kind of look like throughout each grade and what does it look like across the schools? We definitely have science curriculum embedded. We spend an awful lot of time on literacy and math and for good reason. And I don't want to, but we've agreed too that we have to kind of take a step back and look at that. One thing I just want to bring up, and I think it's worth saying, I don't want to dismiss like the STEAM experience or anything because it is fantastic. And I've walked through the classroom many a times, just kind of seeing the STEAM, seeing kids in their STEAM learning and just seeing that, the hands-on and the group work and all that kind of stuff. And it is a great experience. But one thing I think is worth mentioning is I just want to make sure people understand that when we say we took away STEAM, like that we didn't just wipe out all science experience. It's if you look at a student's their week in school, if you were to break it up into those 45-minute blocks, it's really only accounts for like 3% of their learning experience. So it's 3% a week, it's 3% over the course of the year. It's an important 3%. So again, I don't want to like send the wrong message that we're dismissing it by any means, but I just don't want people to also think that like there's a massive chunk of their learning that's being taken away. But 3% is 3%, and we want to make that the best 3% that we can
Yeah.
make. And so
I think just coming up here with the other parents that were here the last time, it's a twofold thing. It's like, yes, they're missing STEAM, but there's also this blank fifth. And the blank fifth,
Yes.
let's get that
Yeah.
fixed for sure, because if STEAM's not coming back, let's get that fixed. And if it means like even leaning on parent councils or leaning on your office to be like, okay, what is the cost to get a residency program from Mass Audubon? What is it like? I've already been reaching out to them because I know the grants are due next month now. It's a whole different system with Mass Cultural, to just have that ready to go and lean on, parent councils and parents to say, this is what this building's going to need and this is how much it's going to cost. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that I think some schools will get that done if it means there's a little bit more and extra than this year, because it was kind of depleted. But I wasn't even going to bring this up. This was my wild idea that I had in my notes.
no, it's all, we want any
And you
idea.
were talking about sponsorships, and we just always say random things at West because we do have that neighbor that nobody likes in Weymouth. And it's like, can we go to big corporations around and say, like, we're talking about sponsors for the baseball teams and whatever, like, come sponsor our science program. You know what I mean? We're like right here at Boston, like, why wouldn't there be a corporation that's like, there's this, underfunded science. I don't think you guys want to say it like that, but you know what I mean? Like, see if they, if they're willing or anybody's willing to just like sponsor that. Or even have, again, parents run around and do it, because we'll do it.
We've been having some come in and
Yeah.
do some things.
Okay.
So,
Awesome.
different places.
Not the unfriendly neighbor.
If I could just say the last thing, I love the word community, school community, and that's the community, it's not just within the school building, it's the parents, it's all the stakeholders that kind of support that. And I know there's limitations to what we can do, but we definitely welcome ideas and we definitely support any kind of support that we can get in terms of improving what we're doing for our students. And you guys are fantastic you have been and continue to will. It's not just you guys sitting here, but really there's so much that parents do, parent councils do, all of that just enhances the school experience. So we do appreciate it. And I can promise we're definitely going to come out with something better to try to alleviate some of that work.
And parent councils have been instrumental in doing enrichment programs before and after school for years and years. So, once again, parents, we're all going to have to tighten our bootstrings and provide for our schools. It's what we do.
It's not up to you, but we appreciate it.
Yep.
What you guys do.
Go ahead, Ash. How you guys doing? I have a lot of questions, but I don't have anything like written out, so. But I guess for me, like I'm looking at this as like a bigger picture. And like, I know you said, Melanie, that this is going to happen again next year. And so for me, like, the question is just like, when does it get better? I've been doing a lot of research, just talking to different people in different towns, looking things up, asking questions. And I met with my District 4 counselor on Sunday, Arthur Matthews, to go over some of this information with him. And I keep digging and I keep digging. And I'm in the iceberg, I'm under the iceberg, and I really want to figure this out. I think you guys know what's that? Did you play Powerball?
Yeah.
I always forget I'm a real adult and I can do that. I'm too busy reading. I'm too busy reading this stuff. And if I did, I would give some to the schools. But for me, the bigger picture here is like it's scary to me that Melanie said, and this is gonna happen next year.
So if I could just, it could happen. So let's say we didn't cut 1.9. And we pushed the problem out a year. We're cutting again next year. But one of the factors that we're talking about here is revenue. So we're predicating our budget on getting 3%, right?
Mhm.
And now we have a budget that's kind of going along at 3%. So next year, revenues are 2%. That's a 1% cut, that's $1 million. So when we say that it will likely happen again next year, this is what we're hearing macro across everywhere that.
It's planning for the worst in a way. You know what I mean?
Revenues will likely continue to decline. And unfortunately, out of our control here at this table.
Yeah, I know. And that's kind of where we go to state, federal,
Yep.
right? We understand, and I've said it before, there's a lot that's out of your hands. There's some, and you guys are just trying to focus on what you can control. And I get that, but I guess just like as a former educator and as a mother, it's like scary to me that the state and the town doesn't want to make the investment in our literal future, like actual people. Like these kids are gonna run the world. And so I guess it's super disheartening, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But so the state, just to go back to some numbers. So the state, you guys are asking for the 92. 92.
Yep.
What does the state think that we need as a total? Do they also agree with that?
It's a good question. Because they've put our foundation budget at 95 million for next year.
Okay.
But that's what their formula spits out, 95 million. And then they say the town can contribute X and the state will contribute Y. So basically the foundation budget, and this, I think a lot of this is due to the Student Opportunity Act changes with the formula.
Mhm.
Our foundation budget increased, I think it was almost 3.5%. And Chapter 70 is only going to cover 1.5% of that. And the minimum contribution total that they're saying the town should do is 5.35%. It's wonderful that the state says that we can increase 5.35% locally. That's even more than what we're asking for here, right? So, but I mean, this is, and I don't want to throw the state under the bus, but this is what the state has mandates and they don't fund them. And the state tells us
Right.
foundation budget, so they don't fund it. So I agree with what you're saying. The state is saying our foundation budget is 95 million next year.
They're also projecting what we should get in revenue. That's like with taxes,
As
with.
opposed to what we actually.
But you can't
Do we
make someone,
pay?
you can't make someone pay, so
Right.
you don't know when, they're saying like, you're gonna get this tax revenue at this time, but that's not really accurate, because you don't know when those people are gonna pay their excise tax, their property tax, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't know when that's coming in.
And-
So that's what their projection is.
And I think your frustration is real, because I actually printed out an article, just reading about the coalitions that are starting in Massachusetts around this, about uniting to advocate for more money. And I mentioned this earlier, that inflation was just over 7-8% last couple of years, and the increase in the formula is 4.5%. So it doesn't keep up with it. And increased in, tuition costs, increase in student needs, increase in transportation costs. So I think what I'm hearing from you is how can you guys mobilize, and I think it's across the state, you're seeing these coalitions start to form.
I'm involved in a state coalition that just started 2 weeks ago, based on, Medicare and Medicaid's cuts. There's those coalitions happening all the time. It's just, you just got to find your people.
Because a lot of districts are looking for a 5% plus. So if you look at some of our local towns, it's the same thing. They're asking for 5, 6, 7% increases to their level service that the towns are unable to fund. So that's where, and some towns are very similar to us in what they're looking at percentage wise of cutting. And other towns are looking for a lot more. Those are the towns that, like Brian was kind of saying, might have kicked the can one year, right? And didn't do a lot of the cutting last year, and they kind of used more of that one-time funding to get through one more year. And now it's all catching up to them. So that's where some towns just kind of vary, but everybody's in very similar
Oh,
situations.
I know that. I've been paying attention, very close attention. Okay, so I guess my next question would be circuit breaker funds. Where are we? Because like when you talk about other sources of revenue, I was kind of learning about circuit breaker funding. So what's up with that?
We're hopeful that we get our typical circuit breaker amount every year. And I think last year was the first time Weymouth was eligible for what's called extraordinary relief.
I was going to ask you about that as well.
We did receive that, and we actually used it to help with the $5.3 million cut last year. So we received for the first time extraordinary relief through ESSER money, I believe. It was the states also provided what's called reserve relief. So we got a few $100,000 in that. So we had total relief $1 million above what we typically get in circuit breaker. We're watching circuit breaker very closely because we, as a practice, you should carry a certain amount of circuit breaker, but we've had to, because again, we're not growing at 3.8. When we have compliance things come up, that's what circuit breaker is there for. Circuit breaker program, I think I've shared this before, when it was established, the two most volatile costs for a district are special ed costs, tuitions, and transportation. You can't charge a fee for special ed. So guess what? We started charging fees for transportation years ago, and the state said, let's do the circuit breaker program for special ed costs and tuition. So we're hopeful that we'll trigger that extraordinary relief number again, but we can't bank on it.
So did you have to deplete your circuit breaker? Did you have to deplete it? Like, I know usually people roll it over from the year before, so you always have like a reserve. But have you had to completely dip into it?
No, I would never fully deplete it.
No.
It would be, you'd never want to fully deplete it.
It wouldn't be fiscally responsible because you don't know what's going to come up next week.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just curious. All right. So the question was already asked. So last year we got 3.8%. This year we're getting 3%. What are the other departments?
We are projecting.
So we're hopeful.
About it yet.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, Ashley, because I know you're really full in on the process this year. We're projecting in our conversations with the mayor's office, like we're comfortable with saying that 3% is what we think we might get. We still have to go through the process with the town.
Yeah.
I don't even think they're there yet with revenue wise themselves, but we feel that that's what it's going to be. But to your prior comment, yes, 3.8 is what we've gotten on average the last 9 years, and we're knocking that number down realistically to 3%.
Are other departments also going to get 3%?
That's pretty much across the
Across the board?
Yeah.
The whole town?
Yep.
Okay. Kind of not really related. Oh, well, yeah, I guess going back to other revenue options, like, do we rent out any spaces and collect money from other people who rent out spaces? Because in Middleborough, they bring in revenue that way. Yeah.
We're
but-
proud of our
Yes.
Champions contract. It's our first official revenue generating contract in Weymouth. But yes, in the past, other opportunities have been out there. I know, I think other areas in town have been rented out in the past.
Fields,
In that,
gymnasiums.
Auditoriums.
I actually just called today on the planetarium. It's $400.
yeah, it's also pretty cool.
It's amazing.
So it's one thing that, and I know,
Gonna do a fundraiser for school.
but it is an area we look at how, whether it's our hall rentals, whether it's the Champions contract, how can we generate revenue by utilizing our spaces outside of our school day?
And your fee increase
counts for
would
that.
also
Okay.
go against those fees,
Yeah,
the rentals.
Yes.
We vote on the rental fees every year.
Every year.
Okay.
May, they'll be voting this year. We'll propose something next meeting for fees. And then the committee votes in May
Could do a fundraiser.
for July 1.
Who could be a school committee member?
But I think, if I could, sorry, I know I'm just kind of going. When it comes to revenue, it needs to be sustainable revenue because then you're just doing the one-time thing.
Right.
And that's what we struggle with too. We can find ways to come up with revenue one time, but that's where we love the Champions contract because that's a 5-year contract and we know for 5 years.
67.
So when we talk about ancillary revenue, though, anything like that you generate might be for one-time things, not staff, but it might be for like one-time things, or it might be to try to build up a reserve fund.
I'm gonna do a fundraiser.
Great question though, Ashley.
I told you I was following along closely. I wasn't lying. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about the elementary instructional coaches and what they do?
Yeah, the instructional coaches are kind of, they're responsible. The one I just talked about, the huge lift with Wit and Wisdom, right? So when we bring in a new curriculum, they're supporting all of the staff, all of the classroom teachers in implementing that new curriculum. They did a lot of the training, even more so training with the Wit and Wisdom, so really coaching them in the classrooms. They do a lot of work with our new staff, making sure that they're properly trained in things like dibbles and phonics. They also do our screener for dyslexia. So they're just integral to our building. They do our data meetings at all the elementaries to go through our student data. Jeremy, am I missing anything?
Professional development, so it's kind of a combination of supporting teachers in the classroom in terms of their instructional practices, and then it's also what I like to call behind the scenes, gathering data and sitting in on professional learning communities, professional development, that type of stuff, just to make sure that, because I think workday is extremely busy, and so they kind of help bring some of that information forward.
Yeah, well, collecting data is it's a huge piece to deciding what you're going to do with curriculum and teach, to figure out the needs of the students that you're working with. So absolutely. Sorry, I'm just checking to see if I have any other questions. Cut. What is happening with the Johnson building?
Good question.
I told you this was going to come up.
It was going to come up.
Did you want to rent it?
We still have,
I'll rent it when I get tax return and then give it back to the school.
so right now, nothing, we're
It's
keeping
sitting
it at warm enough temperature. We have facilities checking on it regularly. It will have to go through committee member Curran, who's not,
She's not here.
no, who's not here. She's on that facilities committee with the town. So we'll have to come back to a future meeting about potential uses. But for right now, we have no plans. We still have the boilers on our capital list. But that's all I can say right now for Johnson.
Okay,
And if we sell it, we don't get the money.
really
It goes to the town. Doesn't go to a school department.
interesting.
We could rent it.
We
I was
could.
just-
It just needs new boilers, so
Right.
it's
Oh.
that project.
We could rent it.
How much would you need from the town to make ends meet?
Oh, I took it
Like,
down.
what
1.9.
percentage do you need?
5 point.
It's $2 million. It's 1.9 million, an additional 1.9 million. So it's 5.25, 5.27%. Yeah, so it's just under 4.6 million.
So you need 5.27%.
That's our ask.
That's your ask. That's what you're gonna ask for the,
That's what we're asking for, but
Okay.
we're realistic and
That's what we
knowing that we need to be prepared for cuts. So what we're asking for is 5.27. We think we're probably going to get 3.
Yeah.
That's the $1.9 million difference.
I see.
So essentially our ask would be roughly 4.5 million, but just to put it in context, I think last year, total additional revenues for the entire town, I think were 4.5 million. And we took a good percentage of that. So we'd have to get our number, the town would have to generate the same increase in revenue they did last year in we would get it all. Fire wouldn't get any, police wouldn't get any, DPW wouldn't get any, the library wouldn't get any. So that's where we're,
We don't want.
I'm glad you're asking the question because we can talk about this. That's where Mel and Jeremy and Alyssa and I are like, and work with the school committee, like, we have to be realistic in what we can ask for what we.
We can ask for the pie, but we're not gonna get the whole pie.
But we have to understand that.
It's also impacting somebody else. It's
Yes.
impacting, it's just going to impact somebody else.
It's
throughout
impacting the
district.
quality of life living in the town.
Yeah.
Period.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that does answer my question. I guess it's good to hear that you're gonna ask for it, even though you don't think you're gonna get it. Because like, the way I kind of described it to some people was, so the way so after I met with Arthur Matthews on Sunday, like I was just thinking about how it kind of feels like we're sitting here waiting for an asteroid to strike and we're just waiting to see how big the impact is. And some of us want to try to avoid the asteroid by a certain percent. I mean, I think it would probably be unrealistic to think that with the way things are right now in the world, that we could avoid the entire asteroid. But I'd like to think if we scooch over a little bit, there'd be less of an impact. And then you could work on the bigger problem and the bigger picture. But does that make sense? That like, I kind of just feel like we're just like, all right, we're just waiting for,
Breath.
you know, to see what damage is done.
And I think that's what we want to be clear. You may feel like a waiting game, but we are actively every day having conversations with the mayor's office, school committee, administration, town councilors like yourself. Because we can't just sit and do nothing.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I was just gonna say that we just have to prepare for what might be. And that's kind of why we're trying to get out in front of it early, just so,
It's not sticker shock.
yeah, we're not sitting here in June saying, oh my goodness, we gotta get rid of all these positions. What are we gonna do? So we're always hopeful and we're always kind of watching and see, and we're always reanalyzing and seeing, but we want to kind of be prepared in case this is where we do land.
Yeah, and
A lot of the additional revenue over the last 9 years, the 3.8% we're getting, a lot of it was driven by new growth. Eventually, you can't always rely on new growth. I think that's what's,
growth meaning,
so but anything above, so any new developments, any new,
correct,
any new building in
Right.
a town or a city. So, law allows the levy of 2.5%. So to me, I've been doing this for years. I've always tried to operate in the world of like, if we can grow our budgets 2 to 2.5% a year, we're doing okay. Anything above that's, you're taking a risk because new growth can take a turn tomorrow,
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about that at Townwide Parent Council, just like the property tax and how we've talked about that. Yeah, just to, first of all, and thank you for your transparency. I want to reiterate that. I really appreciate you guys being so transparent. I did come to a lot of these meetings last year and I don't remember there being this amount of transparency. So it's nice to see that change. Like I remember finding out about the steam cuts from Facebook and being like, what? I'm so confused. Haven't I been paying attention? So like, did I miss something? So it's nice to,
Administrative.
I appreciate you guys being so transparent. And I know that that's not easy at all. And standing in your shoes, all of your shoes that are at the table, you're in a very vulnerable position as you're out in the public and trying to navigate some very serious topics. So thank you for that. I feel like I had one more question, but I think that's it for now. Oh, I know what I was gonna say, sorry. I am gonna meet with, so Townwide Parent Council, as you know, is gonna put in a request to meet with the Education Committee. We're also, per advice, going to reach out to Mayor Headland and Ted Langell to meet with them specifically. So we're gonna try to meet with them and meet with the Education Committee as well. So in that timeframe, like I want I want you guys to be very clear with us too about what you want us to advocate for. Cause like we kind of know what we want to advocate for, but we we want to make sure we're asking the right questions too. Does that make sense? Like if we have this opportunity to meet with Headland and Langell or the Education Committee, I don't want to blow it. I want to use that time really wisely. So if there's anything on your end that you can think of, like please share it with us because we're going to do it no matter what. So you might as well use us as a bridge, if you will.
And just so you know, actually, Brian had mentioned, we meet with them regularly. So we've been just as transparent as we've been here. We've given kind of the same information to the mayor and the chief of staff and Mike Melise, who's the chairperson of town council. So they're all well aware of this information and how we got to our numbers and where we are.
And this presentation, the mini, so we have the full presentation we'll do for the hearing, but this mini presentation we did this evening will be reviewed again tomorrow night. And we're actually sharing with our principals tonight. They're going to meet with their parent councils. They're going to have their staff meetings. We just want everyone to understand, you know, this information in those few slides, because that's really the basis of what we're talking about this budget season. We'll do our typical budget hearing presentation, our town council one, but I think those slides, you know, there's your talking points.
And I think with the conversation, we're all having conversations. We all have different, you know, partnerships throughout the community. One of the town councilors was just here. You know, we also have very real, transparent conversations with several of the counselors and they know the process that we're going through and they're, you know, they're going through similar processes in their own budget. So I think
Several of them have kids in the school system too, so they kind of know what's
we
going on.
definitely have those relationships. We definitely keep them in the loop. Those are people that we, you know, we rely on also to get information. Yeah.
And dates.
Might be at the cottage, but
I just think sometimes when a group of parents shows up, it's a little bit different. No offense to you guys, but you guys all have, I know, but you all have a working relationship together. And so there's kind of this, I don't have to censor myself. And that's what I like.
One of us had those relationships before we even sat here. I've been friends with Fred Heppel for 20 years. You know, it's not like we've had those relationships before. And a lot of us have family members in this district too. So it hits us hard too.
And then also just to reiterate what Karen said about just how like, you know, I think like she doesn't want to have to be up here again about the, you know, music going away. I think like one of the things we talked about in townwide parent council is just like a concern that specialist isn't very special and just like that lack of, I guess, a lack of rigor in the elementary schools with academics. Like we're concerned about the lack of rigor and just the quality of specialists declining over the years. Like, you know, cutting STEAM kind of sets a precedent. And then library, we have ESPs, we don't have trained librarians in there. Librarians go to school, usually a librarian goes to school for a really, really long time. And so it's concerning that like, you know, these kids in elementary school, but when they go to Chapman, you know, how do we know that they know how to look up quality sources or MLA format or like properly research, which is all the stuff that a librarian teaches. So I guess the concern is just like, you know, we want to make sure that our kids' time is being used wisely. And I know some of that is out of your control, but some of that is in your control too. So it's good to hear that you guys are looking at what to do with whatever it's called, tech time, library too.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks.
I don't know if any more here. It's also someone there, but.
Is there anybody, Jess, do you want to?
Nobody else is going.
Yeah, go ahead. And then I'll open up to Zoom.
Thanks, Madam Chair, all of you. I'll try to go sequentially on the topics here. First off, thank you to Brian, Alyssa, the whole rest of the finance team. This district would be in a bad spot if it wasn't for that team. The transparency, the communication, the responsiveness, all of that is greatly appreciated. Just a high level in terms of the net school spending stuff, I know that the concentration is really on the conversation here is really about the budget request, but if I can just throw the numbers out, they've been discussed a little bit tonight, but for fiscal year 26, the required district contribution is $73.5 million. That's an increase of 3.7 million, 5.35%. The state is only providing $30,364,583 in Chapter 78. That's only a 1.4% increase, but as Brian pointed out, when you do the net of it, it's even less than the 75 per student. I think you said it was $68 per student, which is outrageous. And of course, those are conversations that happen at the state level. We'll talk about that in a second. But the bottom line is that the minimum net school spending required for Weymouth for fiscal year 26 is $103.9 million. So so in addition to the 92 million appropriation request from the schools, the town typically contributes an additional through spending through benefits, all of the items that Brian was talking about. That's usually an 8 to 10, sometimes 12% additional increase above that 103 million. That's why over the last few years, Weymouth actually has increased their net school spending obligations, but still trails the state by the average state net school spending numbers by $10 to $12 million a year. Other districts are spending more on schools than Weymouth. That's just the reality of the numbers. If I could, on the presentation, this sheet right here, fiscal year 26 budget presentation, just a suggestion about the layout.
Sure.
You've taken the 2 FTE cut at the district, at central office of 236,000, and you've already taken that out of that top number. My suggestion is that you don't put it there, that you keep the total number as is and then do any savings downstream on the spreadsheet, because it's going to get lost in translation there. The fact that operating budget of 87.4 million and the level service increase of 2.6 million already includes a cut of 2 FTEs totaling to 236,000. That's going to get lost in translation there. You're not going to get credit in a perception basis if you do it there. I'm suggesting you publish the number, the cost number, right? And then downstream on the slide, then subtract the savings from.
And we did go back and forth on that. I think for us, we did it more of the timing of when we developed the level service budget and the ads. But to your point, Gus, I do want to memorialize that as we continue this process, we need to capture and really identify that we've already cut 2 FTEs.
Right, and I think if you pre-include it, it's going to get lost. Despite the highlight, I think it's going to get lost. And so someplace in addition to this particular slide, when you total out the cost of the 20 FTEs, everything else that you're saving.
And include it there.
Yeah.
That's where it should be.
Yep.
This is your exercise at staff reductions, a painful exercise in eliminating staff positions that total this amount. That should be an aggregate number further down the slide.
So when we come back next time, we're going to get a little more detailed. And then as we go through and actually start to identify positions, we will add that to us.
It's just a suggestion. A global question. The budget book is titled preliminary. I'm going to ask this question. This precedes most everybody at this table, okay? In the past, we had this problem. A draft/preliminary budget was presented. It was discussed at the school committee's public hearing, but then the actual document that was tossed over the fence to town hall was different. So I'm sorry?
It won't be. It'll be the same.
Okay, that's my point. So,
and it's another good point, because you've been around longer than me with this stuff. So the full budget book, we call it, is the school committee voted budget. But just so you know, the number's not going to change.
That's great. It's just that the label preliminary suggests that it's not the final one, right? And not that it would be an issue here.
We usually say preliminary because they haven't voted it yet.
Right, because it's always been a bad exercise that the community engages at the public hearing, has in the past, around a particular document that looks a certain way, and then subsequent to that public hearing, the document changes when it's submitted to the town. That's obviously wrong. I'm glad to hear that's not going to happen here. So if at some point the word preliminary can be removed so that it is actually the actual number and budget package that's going to the town, that would be
Because it
great.
becomes proposed, right? It's like my other ones say proposed. Is that what it's?
So the big one, the big bound one,
Funding.
full. And
Voted one.
the preliminary, out of respect for the bosses, we've always just said the preliminary budget, but point well taken.
Again, suggestion. The question about the coaches, it is a little bit confusing, and I understand that you have to wrangle with some staff projections before the decisions were made about what exactly was going to be reduced, but it isn't fully transparent now because you're eliminating 4 coaching positions, but you're replacing them with 2 coordinator positions. You know, so you're going from 4 FTEs, but not really 4 FTEs. It's only 2 FTEs. because- Seven, sorry.
Keep seven.
We got to take 2 out of there, right? Because you're replacing them with 2 FTEs on coordinators. And then you have to tag along the cost of those, whatever the cost savings are from the 7 FTE reduction. Those coordinators are going to be at a salary level.
Yeah.
So we are explicitly point out that 7 positions, go away, but the net savings is only going to be a couple $100,000.
Right. That's.
And we don't know retirements either.
Yeah.
Right?
But as we go through the process, we will get more explicit and detailed in what it looks like. So another good point that we'll.
Yeah, so again, just to have as much information as well as should be there before March 13th of the public hearing, so that everybody's got the accurate, complete, total picture when the community wants to comment about it all.
We're gonna be more detailed next week on the 5th and then even more on the 13th, but obviously, as you know, we're also balancing with
Yeah, I get it.
actual and union positions.
Yep, okay, next, a question about the $743,904. That's on that same slide about the additional needs above the base. If these were for a prior year, why are they not simply included in the total operational budget, since they're not for fiscal year 26? It's not new costs for fiscal year 26.
Good question. It's an increase over what our budget, what we got as a budget last year.
Yeah.
Right? It's an add during the year. We just want to explicitly call out that we had to add to our budget during the school year. And so
Anything that wasn't in the budget book that went over.
anything that wasn't in the budget book. And we don't want to pit any group against any group. It's the reality, the fact of the matter is that we had a budget approved for FY25. We have a budget book, and then we've added positions since. We're just trying to be transparent on we've added positions.
Okay, I don't want that to be misinterpreted as a new expense for fiscal year 26. It's simply the second year, if you will, of cost that you incurred in fiscal year 25.
It's added to 25, but it doesn't go away.
It's just like the CBA annual increases. You don't specifically separately identify those between fiscal year 25 and 26. You include them in your operating budget number for the new year.
Can I interrupt for a second? So when you do these slides, right, total Apple nerd speaking, is there a way to build the slide so it has transitions coming in so that it's not just a flat slide? You know what I mean? So if you're saying.
We have Kelly Powers and Canva, and it's.
To Gus's point, right? So when it says, includes additional initial cut, if that like slides in so that it's a talking point.
It's gonna go whoosh.
Well, I mean, and that's the kind of slides Mary Ellen builds, but I'm just curious, so it's not just a flat slide, so that when you're talking, they'll see this is the actions that we're taking to get to this. It's not just
Then you're gonna see
There
a
you
big,
go.
huge axe come down.
but you know what I mean?
We can
there is,
certainly play with it. My experience, if I don't embed Excel images into a spreadsheet, into a presentation, things change, things don't add up right. They don't, you know what I mean? So I'd rather just take the time to explain it. But I hear what you guys are saying. We're trying to, if we just came in and said, hey, this year, because it's disingenuous that we had an approved budget last year, and it's increased naturally throughout the year because of adding of positions. So we have to call that out and account for that, because that's part of the prioritizing. And because if we didn't, our level service increase is 3.02, but we have to kind of call out that we've added positions too. It's not.
But they were approved positions in fiscal year 25.
No, they weren't.
They were not. They're new.
They're new.
Okay, that's the part I missed. So thanks.
Budget book, they already have.
Part I missed. So these were
Added.
extra to the already.
Said level service of last year's budget, that would be that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, but those-
CBA was
Okay,
approved.
but they were positions that were added in fiscal year 25. The 399 are the
New stuff added.
the new compliance positions for fiscal year 26. Brand new. Okay.
Student movement student that has a one-to-one, we
Clear on that.
cannot give this, we can't be like, wait till next year when we do our budget. We have to give them the position.
I'm clear on that. Thank you. Okay. Again, these are just suggestions, observations. You do a great job.
So do you guys.
Here might be a good point where
Time on it.
this is a collaborative effort.
It is.
My intent and my involvement in all this is really about educating and informing. I get asked questions all the time. I've got information requests all the time. People get my name from other people, And so my intent here is just to inform, educate a new phalanx of people that are interested in what's going on with the school budget. And so that's what I'm trying to I may know the answers to some of these questions, but I'm asking them for education purposes.
And the feedback and input, we take some and do it, and other things we're like, thank you.
That's fine. This might be a good time. Ashley was up here and she made reference to the iceberg.
Yep.
The iceberg is a management principle that I've always believed in, that I've found to be true in my professional career, and I've shared it with different groups. The concept is that 10% of an iceberg floats above the water level, and so it's clearly visible. So you just look at it, you can clearly see it, you understand it, you know what's there, you know what the makeup is, you know how big it is, et cetera. But 90% of an iceberg is actually under the water. So if you look a little harder, you might be able to see, 10, 20, 30, 40 feet below the water. But to really see the content of any issue, you have to take a deep dive. And so that's the reference that, in case some of you didn't know that was the reference that Ashley was making about the iceberg principle. That's why you have to do a deep dive into the school budget and school funding to try to really understand what all of the issues are. Again, I'm always open for correction and education every day. So I did not see where the projected ending and starting balances for revolving accounts and other accounts like circuit breaker balances were in the budget book.
They're not in there yet, full book.
They're not in there yet.
Correct.
Okay. Because they've been there in the past. So there's an intention.
Full book.
Always in the full book.
The full book.
Always, and it will be.
Okay.
And there's more. And we're actually, we're gonna take those revolving and grant accounts and
Right.
just show more explicitly that our operating budget isn't just 80+ million, it's more like 100 million.
Right. Okay. And the full book will be ready.
It's always,
You're killing me, guys.
it's always usually.
I'm working as fast as
our
I can.
amazing,
I know.
school audit- so
April.
It's usually right before after April vacation, he prints it.
Right. But see, that falls into my issue about the example of not all the information is present at the school committee's public hearing.
I know.
And right. So the budget book turns into the full budget book, but not until after the school committee public hearing. So it's
an operating-
a document that you toss
Operating.
over to the town.
Where the school committee is voting an operating budget,
Right. I know.
Grants and
but grants and revolving, I don't.
We don't,
Okay. I get it. And Alyssa, I know how hard you work. I've known
I know,
how,
I'm
been
teasing.
a long
No,
lot.
but it's a good question, but the school committee is voting an operating budget.
Right.
Okay.
That's always how he's operated.
Okay. Fees across the board. You already know what I'm going to say. I wasn't going to say anything about it, but because I was going to wait for the
Parking fee you don't want?
fourth attempt at the athletics presentation. Seems like, I'm going to say this. This was never a problem in the past. In the past, we got fully detailed, very specific, all-inclusive, all questions answered presentations from former ADs. The last couple of years, this is not news to anybody who's been at these meetings, anybody that's watched them, anybody that's heard the questions. They're incomplete, they're inaccurate, they're not comprehensive, and there's been a complete inability to answer simple questions that should be part of an individual who's responsible for running a $1.4 million budget operation. And I'm sorry, but reporting the financials of that is part and parcel of the job, and that has not been the case. Thank you, Rebecca, for bringing that up and for highlighting that issue. Again, I'm going to echo that. This can't continue to be the case. It wastes everyone's time, including yours. The presentation should be complete and fully accurate when it's scheduled to be done. Now we're 0 for 3 on coming back to finish presentations for whatever reasons. Now we have to wait. Now we yet have to wait until the next meeting to hopefully see what the presentation is going to look like. And hopefully that one's going to be complete and comprehensive and accurate, because it'll be the, fourth attempt? That can't continue. It's frustrating, it's inefficient, it's unprofessional. With respect to the fees for athletics, I'm going to say it. You should not, all increases to athletic fees should be off the table. I know that you're going to talk about fairness and just go across the board and increase the fees. First of all, I do not believe the case has been made that there is a $53,000 or $56,000 structural deficit for fiscal year 26. Based upon the information that's been provided to date, that case has not been made. The information isn't there, it's incomplete. So I would say that as of right now, we have not seen evidence that there is a $53,000 or $56,000 shortfall in the athletics account for fiscal year 26. Even if it is, I'm going to point out the fact that this committee and and former administrations have made promises to student athletes and to families of student athletes about athletic fees and savings and not increasing athletics fees, which have all been great to hear. When you implemented waivers, that was a promise that you were going to cut fees for the athletics program. When you implement family caps, that does the same exact thing. When you take a look at, we're going to take a look at how many high school students fall within the definition of free and reduced lunch, you know, and that number continues to go up in order to reduce the cost of athletic fees. Add to that the fact that other extracurriculars, with the exception of photography, thank you, Mrs. Curran, don't charge anything. How's that fair? If you're going to ask for an across-the-board increase from everybody, I would go back to Mary Ellen's question about the fact that you need to consider implementing some even just symbolic fees across all extracurriculars if you're going to talk about increasing athletic fees, because you should not be doing that. Even if it's $56,000, call it $60,000. That is a drop in the bucket in this total budget. And philosophically, we should not be continuing to require student athletes to pay money to participate in a sport representing their high school, representing the town. That should be off the table. That will continue to be my message with respect to that. And I ask you, administrators and school committee, to keep the promises that you have made and leave the athletic fees where they are. We should be working towards eliminating them. I understand that's a huge challenge, but at least let's not talk about increasing athletic fees for fiscal year 26. Finally, I have to say it. The STEAM debacle is an embarrassment. Those positions were eliminated for fiscal year 25, effective July 1st. It's now February. Since that point, when school started in September, there appears to have been no plan, no effort, no exercise to develop an alternative approach to fill that 45-minute-a-week block across the board. It might only be 3% of the total learning time, Jeremy. It's a significant amount of time that's lost on learning. You cannot have a 45-minute block on time hearing parents come to this meeting to talk about their kids are spending time coloring sheets, spending unsupervised, unstructured time on their Chromebooks, doing whatever they want. You knew this was going to be a problem starting July 1st, starting with the school year in September. It's now March. And throughout this entire school year, building leaders apparently did nothing. Central office administrators apparently did nothing to fill that hole that you knew was going to be there when the positions were eliminated for the fiscal year 25 budget. This cannot continue to be the case come this September. It would be outrageous if a solid plan is not in place this summer, to be in place when school starts in September, to address the gap that happens with that 45-minute learning block as a result of the elimination of the STEAM positions. I don't want to end with that, but I will end it in a positive way to say, I appreciate the fact, Madam Chair, that you've allowed the public to participate openly and substantially and robustly in these conversations thus far. I hope that continues. I think you can see that there's an interest in engagement, in participation, and requests for information. So you're doing an excellent job. It's a hard job to do. The financials are what they are. They're complicated. We need to work at the state level to try to advocate for improvements on Chapter 70 funding, obviously, but that's not going to be for this year. That solution is a 3, 4, 5, 6-year solution down the road. If the bill at the State House actually passes to reestablish the Chapter 70 Review Commission at all, it then becomes a conversation with talking to the town side in any way, shape, or form or possible to have the town come up with additional monies, because you cannot continue to implement cuts. Oh, sorry, one final thing. The needs list is not really a needs list. In the past, I'm going to give you copies of the needs list from the past. When it was initially conceptualized 10 years ago, it was more robust, it was more substantive, it was more all-inclusive. It's not just the needs for fiscal year 26. We all know that there are additional needs that the school district needs to have beyond those staffing requests for compliances for FY26 and beyond the replacement of the STEAM positions at some point. We've heard from the nursing director, you need additional nurses because the ratio of nurses to students does not meet the suggested levels that the Department of Public Health puts out there. We've heard from the special ed, I'll call her the special ed director, that there is a need for additional staffing, whether it's ESPs, whether it's specialists, because right now they're being shared, there's overlap, there's missed sessions of delivery happening in special education because those specialists are 100% or above 100% capacity. So if they have to attend an IEP meeting, they're missing delivery sessions that are never made up. Those positions should be on a need list. You have transportation issues that came up that are obviously should be on a needs list. My point is the needs list should incorporate and include to inform and educate everyone, including town hall, councilors, the mayor, whoever, the community, that it's beyond just these staffing positions that you need for fiscal year 26. There's a lot more that should be on your needs list to let Weymouth Public Schools be the high-flying, highly effective, super progress-inducing district that it should and could be. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I open it up to Zoom now?
Yep, so the hand raise feature is working.
Okay.
So if people on Zoom want to raise their hand, we already have one person. And I think Brian has to unmute it to use the speakers.
Do I hit this?
Yeah. Oh, we can call on that person first.
Oh, oh, sorry. So.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, so it's late, so I'll be very quick. Gus really did just touch on what I wanted to mention. I recognize that it is really hard to go through the layoffs that are coming. I have had to lay off people myself, and I've been laid off myself. It sucks. There's no hiding that. So I hope my comments don't seem insensitive to that. The staffing cuts that you mentioned in this meeting were not presented in the last meeting. I don't think so. No. I didn't have that information on hand. But I would just in your sustainability plan, you mentioned the inclusive whole child education is the goal. And I would argue that that is beyond at risk. It's already being, we're already not meeting that by cutting these teachers, cutting the director of the fine and performing arts, and then that person's responsibility is just going to be spread in some way across a bunch of other teachers. It doesn't sound like a fully formed plan. And I know that the teachers are already very much stretched thin as they are. And so we're just asking them to take on more and more, which is going to continue to deteriorate the education that your students and our kids are getting. If we are submitting the $92 million budget, even though you assume that you're only going to get 3%, can I ask why we can't include some money for STEAM? And the reason I ask is because you did give a very harrowing warning in the last meeting that next year is going to be worse. So are we holding out hope that we'll be able to get it next year? And that's why we're not just straight out asking for it this year?
So the only thing I'll add is I think the conversation earlier that will continue is we think it just might look different than what the 4 positions were that were cut last year. So.
Yeah, and we certainly hear everyone here talking about STEAM, importantly, the block of learning that we're hearing a lot about. But I think to remind everybody, our goal is always looking at pre-K through age of 22, right? And that is our responsibility to do what's right for all of our students in all of those grades in all of those schools. So, I hear what you're saying about the whole child. And I think, people will talk about STEAM, but science is taught in the classroom. If we eliminated music, music would not be taught in the classroom. Art wouldn't necessarily not be taught in the classroom. PE could not be taught in the classroom. So that's where we kind of looked at that STEAM block of like, we still would have science. We're working with our teachers to implement more STEAM projects in the art room. So we are doing our very best. As Gus had mentioned, we have a lot of work to do about that 45-minute block in the library, and we are working on that. But at this time, given the $1.9 million cuts, I do not see STEAM coming back next year.
And I need to put a finer point on this. As you're working on how you're going to implement STEAM into the classroom outside of those 4 teachers, I really hope it's not more handouts and worksheets. Our kids are coming home with piles and piles of paper that we're paying for because we can see how much paper costs in this budget. So I really do hope, and hopefully it'll be presented to us what the plan is for that block. I understand that it wasn't like a huge chunk of learning time, but children are coming home complaining about that block and asking for STEAM to come back. That doesn't happen often, that students are asking, at least my 8-year-old, hey, I want to actually learn about this thing. So it may be a small amount of time, but our children, your students, want it. So I kind of want to reiterate the question, even if it's not the full $400,000, I think you cited for those 4 teachers, can we put some money in so that there's that supplemental budget so that, whatever you decide to come up with for replacing them, there's support for it? Is there a reason, can we do that?
I think with what the administration and, we're trying to do is think outside of the box. And there is good pockets of STEAM happening. It's just being consistent across the board throughout every school. We have 8 primary schools, it's the consistency piece I think just needs to be had. And I think that's what we can work on as a district.
And so yes, and I do understand the comment, and I do hear the previous, I'm getting tired, mentions or comments about STEAM as well. I think what we can do a better job with, and maybe what we should commit to doing a better job about, is being open and transparent about the plans we're ruminating about with STEAM, like as you alluded to, and communicating something out to parents so they don't just see this group of people sitting here nodding our heads and then not doing anything in the back end. I do personally. I see a future where STEAM is embedded into our elementary schools, not as a one-off once a week, but as the way honestly I think STEAM is intended to be, which is a part of almost all curricular subjects, and done with intentionality and specific design. So, but I do, when parents are raising these concerns, I can't understand how they're feeling because they're not hearing from us the ideas that we're thinking about moving forward. And I do, to the administration, I do think that would help just to be a little bit more.
Specifically dollars wise, I think I thank you for reiterating the question, because I think, so it may not be staff, but even if you think about, all right, if a plan includes, something with curriculum or something with supplies or something with a stipend, we have those lines budgeted, and it's to the discretion of the district and the buildings to spend those lines. So you may see a curriculum line or a supply line. Just because it's in the budget doesn't mean we know definitively what we're spending every dollar on next year. So whatever the plan is, we will fund through those sources, if that helps to answer your question.
And maybe when we do know.
Thinking about having a lot, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Zoom is awkward. I was just saying, maybe Brian, when we do know or do have an idea of how things will be allocated,
We'll talk about how
we would share that out.
We can share that out. And honestly, what we're trying to accomplish, and I think it's doable, there are limitations in terms of not having those STEAM teachers in there. But for each individual child, what we're really trying to accomplish is we need to have 40 good experiences over the course of a school year. That's what it amounts to. So I think it's a doable, even with the circumstances of, how, what we have in place right now, and there are limitations in terms of collective bargaining agreements and things like that. But I still think with that, I think if we're creative, and we will come out with a good, something that's kind of a scope and sequence, something that has some flow to it in terms of what we can do for each child, again, because they're going to go in there once a week, about 40 weeks in a school year. We want them to make sure that they have a good experience during that time. And I think that's reasonable. It's a reasonable ask for you guys, and I think it's something that we can accomplish.
Sorry,
Yes.
can I just add something to that?
Yes.
I know right now because, of the STEAM teachers were taken away and there's an ESP in the classroom. So I have learned through this process that the ESP can't plan or teach. So what's going to happen? You're going to give them this curriculum, but they can't teach it. So then is my child just going to sit on the computer and learn it that way? Like, is that what the idea is?
Yeah, and
It sounds great, but in my head, I'm thinking, who's teaching it? If you don't have a teacher that can actually technically teach.
They definitely can't plan, they can implement, and so there's some gray in terms of what's teaching, what's implementation. Planning is really what the big key component is in terms of what an ESP can do and can't do. But I think that's where we're gonna have to get creative, and I don't wanna say what we're doing here because I don't know yet, but we've definitely tossed around some different ideas on ways that we can accomplish that, to sort of, to make sure that we're taking care of everyone's needs and making sure that we're taking care of our ESP's needs, the students, and coming up with a better experience. And so right now, I mean, we've put out, I don't know that it's, I don't want to say it's that definitely the experience could be better, but I don't know that every time that a child goes into that space that it's not good. I mean, I've met with the ESPs, I've met with, one of the principals and I just went to their last meeting and talked about some of the things that they have worked on with students. So I don't know that every time they are sitting, I don't want to say they're not because I'm not there every day. I'm not there, for all those blocks, but I'm hearing that there are some positive experiences in there, that it has gotten better from where we started in September to February. And I know you mentioned that, Gus, there has been some work done, but it's hard because there are different, limitations to what we can do, which you kind of just described. So we're trying to make that work. We're trying to work with our staff to make that work with our principals. But we know we've got to come up with something more solid for next year. And I think we'll accomplish that one way or another. But we also know that we don't have the 400,000 or however you want to break down that amount to put it back where it was. So, I mean, we're sitting here talking about cutting 20 other positions, cutting 7 coaches. None of this is good. But as Mel kind of stated, we've got to look at K through age 22 and pre-K, I'm sorry, through age 22 and make sure that we're meeting all kids' needs. So there's got to be some level of lack of, less than perfection, I guess. And I'm not, perfection is not a good word, but it's not going to be as good as what we had previously. And that's everywhere, all across the board. We're going to have bigger class sizes. We're going to have less instructional coaching. Everything's going to take a hit because we just don't have the finances. And as hard as that is for us, for all of us, I mean, you guys, us, everybody who's part of this community has to kind of swallow some of that, I think. And we're going to do our best, and we will be transparent in terms of what we're coming out with. It's definitely.
I understand that the money's not coming in, so things have to get cut. What I'm not understanding is why we can't allocate some of the budget that you're submitting to be able to prop up what it is that you do come up with.
I think we can.
I think there is, it's just not specific. It doesn't specifically state it. So there's a stipend, there's probably a stipend.
Yeah, like professional development
Right, it just
training,
doesn't say specific
curriculum
to-
work, all of those things can be done in other places in the budget.
But previously, the STEM was an additional line item. So I'm just saying.
For the poor people,
an
yes.
additional, yeah. So why not set aside $75,000 to support whatever the new idea is and have that already set aside and ready for us to use? Because what was mentioned in the last meeting is that those of you sitting at the table don't make the final decision about the budget. So why not submit it and have the town tell you no, as opposed to doing that ahead of time?
I think the tough thing and I'll say it, the tough thing is if we're taking 75,000, we're taking it from somewhere else too. And that's the tough position. It's coming from somewhere. And I think that's a really difficult thing to decide. Go ahead, Betsy.
As someone who's always thinking of generating funding, what's the status with Union Point? How long is that expected to?
That's a huge question.
Great question. No, sorry. No, but I'm just thinking, like, is there a projected
Had a
time
stroke.
for there to be some money finally being generated?
We do, I mean, I don't have anything to say tonight, but
Sorry.
Okay.
Come see me in the morning.
No, but
We do
looking at
talk
it like
about, I
as-
mean, that's when Mel and I meet with the mayor's office, like, all these conversations come up.
I guess I'm just saying it's been like 20 years, 20 years already, like, you know, oh my gosh, I'm just befuddled.
Sorry, guys, go ahead.
Something related to that.
Yes, go ahead.
He didn't mean to strip a hornet's nest.
I've mentioned this before. It relates to the foundation budget formula in Chapter 70 calculations. The more you build, the more your new growth number is, the more the state takes a look at it and says, oh, you have more money now. So now we're going to incorporate that. It's called using the equalized property value in the calculation for the foundation budget. Weymouth currently has a 17.4 billion of the equalized property valuation number that DESI, that the state uses to calculate Weymouth's foundation budget. Meaning, they look at it and say, oh, you've got this whole bucket of property tax potential. So therefore, when we factor that in, we're going to expect that you're going to be able to contribute more money to your school budget, and we're going to decrease the aid number. So it's a vicious cycle.
It's not so simple.
No, it isn't, but it's a vicious cycle of.
Is that the understatement of the day?
Right. It is a complicated issue, but I just want to point that out. Everybody says, oh, let's build, 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 build. Yeah, you can build, but then the state says, well, that you can afford to pay more money for schools, and we're going to give you less.
And you need people to afford to live there, which that's not easy either. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Just going back to the problem with STEAM and having an ESP in the room, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is a contractual DESI issue. Because contractually, you need to give the elementary teachers a prep time. You got rid of their prep time because those teachers were cut, because that's specialists, usually they drop off their kids, right? And then they go back to their room. So contractually, the
Scheduling issue.
teachers need that time to, but for DESI, it's a time on learning issue. Does that make sense? So like the time on learning
Scheduling piece is definitely a big piece of it.
with the contractual piece, kind of make it so, but so the ESPs are literally in there to babysit. That's what's happening in some places,
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
but
I wouldn't
I wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't put
They're
it.
working pretty hard.
Yeah.
Into a babysitting category.
I'm not saying they're not working hard, but I'm just saying that they
They're
need
also,
somebody
like,
to watch
They're also
them.
facilitating, like
They're also
Jeremy's saying, they're facilitating, the plans that we're presenting for them. They're working very hard in those periods. So I just.
But the issue is contractual time on learning. What do we do with this budget cut? Kind of like, those are the three things kind of coming together for that issue? Or no?
I don't really know.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
I don't know if that's the answer to the specific question that you're asking. I will say in general, that's the formula for almost all of our problems. Like, those.
Or the path we take to solve it.
Yeah, I shouldn't call anything a problem, but those three factors are the things we have to consider with all the decisions.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they're babysitting. What I'm saying is that there are multiple, when you guys make a decision, there are multiple things at play here. You've got to think about the contract. You've got to think about what DESI wants and says you need to do. And then you have to think about the resources that you have. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Diagram of,
yes.
Yeah.
difficult.
Okay.
So that's kind of where you're at right now with that issue, is like, how can we meet the needs of X, Y, and Z when this is what we have for X, Y, and Z? Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just say, if you picture it as a Venn diagram, that's probably a bad one, but if the three factors you talked about, if strings are connected to each of them, if you pull out one this way, the other two are going to be influenced as well. They're going to be pulled. So it is, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think it's a good point in discussing what goes into the decisions.
Right. I'm just saying, like, people may not know that when they just see steam getting cut and you know what I mean? Like, they may not understand that when you make a choice, you have to think about the different layers and how they all affect each other. That's all.
There's also the compliance piece.
Right.
Oh, so there's four.
At least four.
At least four.
Carlos,
And building space.
did we
Yeah, five.
answer you? I
Even 0.6.
apologize, we interrupted. Okay. Anybody else in Zoom?
Yeah, the hand raise feature is alive, so if somebody wants to talk, they can.
Raise your hand if you would like to talk.
I've seen nobody
I
chair.
didn't see nobody. Anybody here? No. I'm going to take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
You're adjourned. Thank you,
Wait,
everybody.
I need a second.
Oh, sorry.
Tracy seconded and
Second.
now we vote.
Roll call vote?
Nope. All in favor?
We're adjourned.
Great.
Thank you.